don't show prep. So, so he had no idea.
I just barely make it in.
I'm sure you can tell, but we don't show.
I mean, let's put the cards down on the table here.
Miami Hurricanes, yeah. You know the name already. It's Mercy, ha ha. It's a 6-ring Kane show. Can't forget the name though. Got Jazz, Blue, Vision, DJ, break the game code. Ain't no changing them, ain't no breaking them. Real Portland live from the Hard Rock Stadium. Ball 14 for the orange and green. We see the 6-ring champs. It's more than a dream. This is life on the field. Beyond 100 yards, a hurricane that's never still put a damage to your squad. The 6-ring Kane show. The 6-ring Kane show. The 6 Rings Kane show. You know.
What's wrong with us? Seriously.
What's wrong with us? We're Miami Hurricanes fans.
Welcome to the 6 Rings Kane Show, a show dedicated to Miami Hurricane sports, featuring the legendary Larry Bluestein, Jazz Santana, Vish, and Danny Gillette. Let's go Canes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another 6 Rings Kane show, joined by Blue and DJ. How's it going, guys?
Good, kick. Doing good.
Yeah, we are short one Jazz Santana this week as he last minute had an issue with his truck. He's trying to get that figured out. Hopefully before we do the baseball show at 9:30. Otherwise, I'm going to be solo piloting that thing. But if he has a problem with his wheels, we know what can help him.
Yes.
That is definitely You Brake Will Fix, our presenting sponsor of this show. If you run over a pothole and it causes your steering wheel to shake, if you're losing air in your tires, there could be an issue with your wheels. And if you got an issue with your wheel, You Brake Will Fix is your solution. You Brake Will Fix is Miami's premier wheel repair and restoration company with over 20 years of experience. Located in North Miami, You Brake Will Fix offers quick repairs for damaged wheels, and in most cases, free loaners. When the car is not a quick repair. If your wheels are looking weathered and you're thinking maybe I want to buy new ones, instead you can refinish them. They'll do in-house powder coating, machining, polishing, make your wheels look like new without having to replace them. So contact Mark and his staff at 305-748-0112 and follow them on all socials at You Brake Wheel Fix. And if you mention 5 reasons, you'll get 5.5% off your next repair. That's You Brake Will Fix, powder coating, and wheel repair at 305-748-0112, located at 1848 Northeast 143rd Street in North Miami, Florida, 33181. That is 305-748-0112. All right, so it seems like recruiting never stops here. So it's a big weekend on campus despite the weather issues. So Blue, I know you were at you saw the Under Armour camp and got at least a glimpse of the linemen and saw the kids there before it got lightninged out. But how was that experience? Any players stand out to you there?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I think that it was the Rivals camp. I'm sorry. the Under Armour was a couple weeks ago. I don't know. I'm coughing so much, but I will tell you there was an impressive group of linemen. I saw Jordan Campbell was there. Didn't get a chance to watch
TJ's guy.
Love Jordan Campbell. Yep.
Well, the whole thing was we didn't get a chance to. I mean, he came. I saw a lot of everybody, but after the lineman work, they took a little bit of a break, and during the that time, lightning came and a good group, but. I've been really, really, really impressed with the linemen. That may have been the best and the most talented group of linemen that I've seen at an event like that. got a chance to see Ryan Moret, who's a big Miami target. I know they love Miami, and they've been to a lot of things. But he also had said he was going to take his visits, and he has. He was the MVP, played center, had a chance to go against some pretty good kids. The Barclay kid, Chancel Barclay, who committed to Clemson, was there. Nice looking kid. He was another MVP candidate. But there was some, I don't ever look at lists, but there's a couple of budding linemen that are coming. Mark Matthews from St. Thomas Aquinas. Everybody's on him. Big offensive lineman. Got a chance to watch him. Good defensive kid, 2027, a junior, Frederick Ards from Orlando Jones. He caught my eye as well. There was some, and you know what? It was a lot of IMG kids there. At least 7 or 8. And that always kind of raises the bar a little bit. Of course, probably the marquee kid was the defensive end, who's Jake Krell, who is on everybody's list. Defense. I don't know. You probably remember, Vish, when Virginia Tech had Corey Moore coming off the edge. Well, wasn't very big, but very effective. In the 6'2" range. But, Corey did play in the NFL, and he, had an opportunity to be kind of a hybrid. Well, Jake reminds me a lot of him. He looked really good. I thought he was one of the top kids. Another guy who I know they're getting interest from a lot of different schools, but Miami's certainly in a lot, was a kid another guy, I don't know if you remember, Vish, when Miami had the nose tackle back in the day, short from Ely. I'll think of his name in a second. Not very big, but low center of gravity.
Was it Taraz McCray?
Taraz McCray, exactly. So Cameron McCaney from IMG, he was in that little group. He looked extremely good. There was, like I said, there was some really good players on, and you don't really, because the state of Florida isn't really always known for producing linemen, but that's changed, obviously, thanks in part to IMG, who brings in kids from everywhere in the country. But yeah, I was extremely impressed with a lot of those kids there. Had a chance to watch the quarterbacks throw a little bit. Darian Coleman was there. Darian spends it. No doubt about it. Still not the biggest guys, but I don't really think that matters if you run the offense well. The offense isn't predicated on the drop back passing, so you don't have to rely on the offensive, line being too big, because a lot of those guys, like even Cam Ward, broke containment quite a bit. So if you're going to break containment, that doesn't really matter, as long as you could spot guys upfield and know where they're going to be. But he looked good. I thought he threw the ball extremely well. They had a couple of other local kids like Zach Katz, who's a 2017 kid. He was on hand too. But I had a chance to talk to Jordan Campbell a little bit. I'm telling you, if he sticks with Miami, that's a type of guy you win with. He's a highly intelligent kid. I saw him this year. He was he and Cooper, the running back from Chaminade, and the kid is about to make his decision. I think he made it to Florida, but I think he backed off a little bit. The DB kid who reclassified from Northwestern, and also the wide receiver Naheem Burrows from Jacksonville Bulls. But they all played in the Under Armour game this year, which was the first year they let juniors play. And Campbell ended up with 7 tackles. And you got to remember, it's not 7 tackles against a JV squad. These are these are going to be frontline type of kids at, Ohio State and Alabama and Notre Dame. And so, getting a chance to see that a little bit more. We have quite a few camps coming up. I'm not a big 7-on-7 fanatic. I'll go see them, but I'm not gonna, like they're playing every week now. I mean, these teams are in Dallas for that OT event where they bring in the best teams in the country, and I'm just an occasional see a guy. I'm not gonna spend $2,800 to go out to Dallas and stay there for 5 days and watch them, play in shorts and t-shirt. But in Florida right now, we're wrapping up college spring. Miami will have their spring game on the 12th, which will be at 3:30 over at the Cobb. But they start festivities at like noon, with autographs and. So I guess the thing is they're making them available to the season ticket holders and the booster type people first, which you can understand. But not everybody wants to go, and then the leftover tickets will get a chance. So fans will have an opportunity to see them. I'm a big advocate of, bringing them where a lot. It's like FIU, which obviously smaller school, but they've been out in the community 3 times doing scrimmages. See, I think Miami really needs to get back to that, at least once during spring and, like go to, Palm Beach and have a scrimmage there like they did a couple of years ago. Cause it gives it, get you a fan base, get you a few extra people, because not everybody makes the trek every week down to see Miami, in Miami from Palm Beach, which is like an hour. But as soon as they finish, April the 28th, high schools around the state start their spring. And then you'll see, Miami will scatter all over, because the state of Florida is one of the very few states that actually have a full spring. California, Texas, some of those others have spring, but they don't play games. They don't have, but in South Florida, they have referee scrimmages where you'll get about 14 teams together on a day, and college coaches come to that and see 7 games and get a chance to, and it's tackle. So, and then obviously you have your spring game, which is the 3rd week of May. And then all hell breaks loose for the month of June, because there's no July. The NCAA took away July, the first 3 weeks of July, but that's when they send all the coaches on vacation and stuff. Although I don't think Mario ever goes on vacation. You never know, especially with the portal and, kids changing their mind, that anything could happen. It's sort of like having a doctor on house call, you can go away, but you better be ready. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the next, not 8 months, because right after the spring, you start your summer camp in the first week of August. Then everything starts going the last week of August, the 31st. And then we got hopefully end things in January, middle of January.
That'll be nice, wouldn't it?
Such.
Yeah, taking it all the way to the mid to late January would be good for this this program.
Yeah,
would be nice. Would be nice.
It would be and if Miami is so fortunate to run the string, they'll play a home game for the national title.
That's true. It is
Since
in Miami next year.
Huh?
Yeah, so it is. It's the Orange Bowl's the host.
Yeah, the Orange Bowl will be the host, and they still will have the Orange Bowl game on the 31st of December. But then 3 weeks later, they'll play, 3 weeks later, they'll play the national championship game. But that 31st game will be a quarterfinal, I believe. So Miami will get, the Orange Bowl will still get a quarterfinal.
Yeah.
So you never know.
Yeah. A lot to look forward to. DJ, I know you mentioned Campbell off there before we started here. What about him stands out to you, and why were you excited that he committed to Miami?
I really like his aggressiveness and how he, his instincts, as soon as the ball is snapped, he fires off the football and he's able to, immediately make a play. It's not like he waits. It's not like he's kind of passive in how he reads the plays. He immediately goes and gets it. And, he's the type of guy where you can put him, in multiple situations, whether it's pass rushing whether it's a little bit of coverage, because these days linebackers need to know how to cover or at least be somewhat proficient in covering. And he's also the type of guy that you can kind of build your linebacker group around. He's just an overall really good athlete. And, Miami, ever since we started this show, I'll just say as a point of reference, the linebacker group has kind of been up and down a little bit. We've seen years where they've struggled and we've seen years where they've been better. And, adding a guy like Campbell to the linebacker group would certainly be an upgrade over what we've had and be a nice kind of cornerstone for that positional unit. And then you can take it from there. It kind of helps you build the rest of your defense.
So, Blue, I know you threw in the caveat if he sticks. What do you think do you think he's solid to Miami, or is this more of a soft?
Well, the more every day goes by, you think it's looking better and better, and the fact that he's still I know, but this don't mean anything, because I remember Patrick Peterson wore University of Miami stuff forever. But every time I see him, he's always, in UM stuff, like yesterday, and he was hanging out with Darren Coleman. So they kind of, formed a little bit of a bond, which I like to see because, as those kids, people don't realize, but as those kids become closer, then, hey, before you know it, they're freshmen in a room together.
Yeah.
So, you get those bonds like that, and that's a really important facet of recruiting, is that when, excuse me, like Luke Nickel did this when he committed to Miami, he started forming a bond with the rest of the guys, and they had a nice little deal. So when they all got on campus, they kind of knew each other. It's they've been communicating, they're in chats. I'm sure they, hit each other up, on, whatever it is, on FaceTime or whatever. And now, because of the fact that a lot of these 7-on-7s travel, and they're in Vegas and they're in Dallas and they're in LA and Chicago and, Nashville and such, these guys are, hanging with each other on the airplane, when they eat, when they play, in the hotel. So from that standpoint, from a social standpoint, when you have guys who are on the fence, like the kid Flowers I was just saying, who obviously he's a heavy lean to Florida, but I don't think his recruitment's over. I think he wants to go in. He reclassified. Yeah, so it's good to see that. It's also good to see somebody like, some of the young kids that have come in early from Miami. And we all know that Malachi Tony's another cheat code, sort of like, a couple of the others that have come in, enough so that he takes up some of the post discussion for Coach Cristobal. When he was had the ask about Malachi Tony and he answers, and I think he's just overwhelmed with what this young man brings to the table, because no matter what anybody thinks, he's a plug and play kid. You're not sitting that Lamborghini in any garage. I can tell you that right now. I mean, he's a guy that's going to be front and center, just like O.J. Frederick was against Florida last year. I think come 31st at the stadium against Notre Dame, you're going to see him in quite a few schemes. I think Ray, as I said last week, believes he has a lot to prove this year. And he's worked hard. I talked to Kevin Beard last week, and he told me this 2 years ago, that he said that the kid had a long way to go and had to grow up, and he had to mature, and he had to, instead of thinking he knows everything, he's going to have to work. And I think he's kind of come to that realization, because he's a very intelligent kid. They come from, I know the family really well, and they're very smart people. So, I mean, it's just a matter of him, understanding that, his 4.33 speed's not going to be a cure-all, especially at a Power 4 school where your linebackers at 6'3", 235 pounds are running almost that, So, I think Miami's finding out a lot about, like you said, guys, about the linebacking core, or as DJ said. I mean, this is going to be, this spring has been a learning experience, and to me, we know they have the talent up front, and I reiterate, it's great to have Bain back, but Messidor is so grounded in the fact that he's played so many games that nothing overwhelms him, and that's why I think he's going to be such a key to the front seven, and especially the glue. Like last year, they came unhinged after the, starting with the Virginia Tech game, where the front seven wasn't getting any penetration. You had Bain out, so you had your continuity, whatever continuity you have was lost. Secondary wise, like I said last week, I truly believe the upgrades have been made are just ultra noticeable. The talent level is just so much better. Than it was last year.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you could see DJ. I mean, when you look at the kid Zachariah Poyser, or you look at Brantley or Brown or any of those guys that are sliding in, they've had experience, and this isn't the same old. Not that any secondary in America is going to be able to withstand 7 seconds back there, but NFL teams can't do that. But I think the defense is, you have a coordinator. I don't want to take anything away from their previous coordinator or their coaches, but you have a coordinator now that doesn't settle. And that's the thing. You make a mistake and he's not going to go, don't worry, we'll get it next time. He'll be in your ass. And that's the way it should be. I mean, I remember, it's not fear by coaching, but it's almost like when Nick Saban had the secondary at the LSU. I mean, he'd lay into you. Oh, don't worry, we'll get it next time. Next time ain't happening for you. And that's how you have to coach, because these kids are at a level now. And remember, your practices and your practice periods are a lot shorter than they've ever been before. So whatever you have to get done, you've got to get done in that short window. And, and then you get your ass up and watch film and go over what that's why they extensively film every practice and every scrimmage, because they don't care if you ran the ball 74 yards. They care about the fumble, that you had. So that's how you win. I mean, that's how Alabama is managed in Georgia, and those teams stay at that level because, they have talent, but at the same time, they don't continue to repeat the mistakes that they've made. And I think that's where Miami's at, and you could see that in the offensive line. Like when I went to their scrimmage 2 weeks ago, watching Mario get into their butt a little bit, and this is a good group. Really good group. But he got in there and he goes, no, not acceptable. Run it again. And those are the type of things. That's where you're become much better and better and better. It's the days of, don't worry, we'll get it next play. No, that ain't going to cut it, because you do that in the game and you make a mistake and that's an 80-yard touchdown. You ain't getting that back. So I like the approach. I love the coaching. I think the staff itself has really upgraded to that point where they're learning a lot. And that's the one thing you got to give Coach Cristobal credit for, is he's really made the coaches, as you could see, the change every year in the coaches. He's made them accountable. He's made them, accountable for everything that happens. And it's sort of like I was rationalizing yesterday. Well, last year, the coaches put him in the right spots. They just didn't make the play. You don't want to hear that. But, I think that the offensive line is the start and end point on that offense, especially with new cast of characters at receiver and quarterback. I think the transition is going to be a lot more seamless than it would have been last year or the year before. But yeah, there's some observations that I think, and I know DJ, you watch a lot of the offensive line play, because I know you're that tight endish type of guy, but you watch a lot of the offensive line. You look at some of those guys like Markel Bell.
Yeah.
I mean, and you look at some of those, prospects that have come in. I think they're in good hands.
Yeah, I really do too. And if you want to build, good offensive line culture, it's not about just one good offensive line on the roster right now. It's about stacking talent for the future and identifying the proper players to fit in your scheme. And I think not only do we have good offensive linemen on the roster right now and in the future, but I also think they're very, good linemen in terms of scheme fit. They're very good, pass protectors. They're very, fundamentally sound. And that's only going to get better with the coaching of, Cristobal and Mirabal. You have two of the best offensive line coaches, in my opinion, in the country that they have to work with. So, I mean, when you look at this offensive line unit, not only right now, but in the future, it's hard not to get excited about it.
Yeah, and I do think it's important that Ray kind of stuck it out. Obviously, his coach caused a little bit of a kerfuffle, we'll say, last year with some of his comments. His high school coach.
Yep, I remember that.
And it's very easy nowadays to hit the portal button. Someone will pick you up, especially when you have talent like he does. But this struggling through these things builds character, and it's how you grow. And I feel like a lot of these kids are missing that now. Where 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you didn't have a choice. If you wanted to transfer, you have to sit out a year. You might get one shot at it. You expected to have to kind of sit on the bench, work through things, really earn your playing time. And now there's an easy button to leave and get an opportunity somewhere else. And so as kids are increasingly taking that, they are losing a little bit of that, that ability to overcome adversity that you used to have to do. Like, it was required. You weren't going to really play as a freshman. You have to sit there and take it and just deal with it. And now it's like, well, I'll just hit the portal. And then they're in a rude awakening at the next level because they don't put up with any of that crap there. So I think it's really good for him that he stuck it out, that he said, yeah, it's a competition, kind of acknowledging he was behind on the depth chart last year, so he didn't play a lot, and he's earning his reps this year. That'll pay off not just for the team, but for him personally. Because you got to be able to fight through things and overcome it, look at yourself and what you can do to change your situation. It's very easy to point at others, say, well, they're not playing me or this or that. Or as Blue said, the coach is putting them in the right place and they're not making the play. And at one point, no, you all have to perform on every play. And I mean, I know Blue was being kind. I feel like Blue was being kind to last year's coaching staff.
He was. Yeah. I'll give him credit. The credit's due.
He was tap dancing around that a little bit because that thing was atrocious. I mean, we had defensive tackles out in coverage.
Yeah.
I mean, we had all sorts of stuff that I get. Sometimes players don't execute. There were times where it's like, conceptually, this just isn't going to work.
Yeah. At times it was the defense uncoordinated, not necessarily a defensive coordinator.
The defensive uncoordinator, Lance Guidry.
Yeah. But, and Vish, I think you make an interesting point about kids, sticking it out, and I do think it's commendable. But there's also a lot of money involved. And if you told me as a 19-year-old kid that you could give me $2 million and I can go play at this school, I'm not going to say no to that. And I'm not saying that's right.
Yeah, but Ray's not getting $2 million.
No.
So,
I'm just saying in general. Like,
yeah, I'm not. I don't disparage any kid if someone drops a bag on and be like, I'm going to that school because they're paying me a ton of money. That to me is fine. My point is, once you get there, it's not going your way. It's very easy, not for monetary reasons at that point. It's just for like, I don't want to deal with this. Hop in the portal. That to me is different. That if someone comes in with a big dump truck of money, I'll be like, see ya.
Yeah, right. No, it's just so
that's a business decision, but I think some of these kids are choosing to enter the portal rather than fight for their roster spot or fight for playing time because it's easier. And the other coach will tell them what they want to hear to induce them to come over. It's not necessarily a monetary thing at that point.
Oh, for sure. It's just so interesting how it's completely kind of for a lot of these kids become a monetary thing and not a I'm going to work hard and work my way up type of thing.
I mean, the monetary thing I get. If they're going to get paid more in college than they would ever get paid in the NFL, you might as well just take the money. I don't see.
No, I agree. I would. I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, I'm going to sit on the bench and not get $5 million at an SEC school somewhere." I wouldn't. I'd take the money and run. You kidding me?
Yeah, but I think the kids were talking about the ones that couldn't work up their own depth chart or not getting that kind of money from another school. At that point, they've kind of lost that opportunity.
Right. No, I agree. It's just interesting how all this NIL stuff has kind of changed the game in terms of competition and sitting on the bench and, waiting your turn. And I do think it's commendable for the kids that do.
It's not even, to me, it's not even waiting your turn. It's earning your spot. Because I personally get frustrated when coaches, the season's not going well, they just start throwing the younger kids out there.
Yeah.
It's like, no, did they earn that playing time? Because if they didn't, you're screwing your seniors over and your veterans over because they're not getting to play when they need to get drafted and all that. And you're teaching the kids they don't have to earn it because you're just throwing them out there because the team stinks. Like,
no, I agree.
To me, everyone has to earn their spot on the field or they shouldn't be playing. And I don't know that we necessarily see that anymore, especially as Blue has commented, not in this context necessarily, but many times about, you have to re-recruit your own kids constantly too now.
Yeah, you do.
One way to do that is be like, hey, I'll give you some playing time. And maybe sometimes they don't warrant it. So, yeah, it's a tough balancing act now for everyone.
And it's tough, too, because if you play those kids, that now they have more tape for other schools to see. So, I mean, there's that part of it as well. It's a double-edged sword in so many ways.
And I think that's where, at least for Miami, Mario helps a lot because he's just straightforward, blunt, to the point. You know where you stand with him, whether you like it or not. You know where you stand with him. So the games aren't really being played there that some of these other coaches might be doing. So, that doesn't mean kids won't enter the portal. They'll enter the portal because they know, they're being told exactly where they stand in the pecking order and what they need to do, and they don't want to do that. But we don't really see a lot of this. Mario's not someone that takes half measures. So
no.
And it's not someone that's like, political with his language. He'll tell them straight up, and that type of sincerity does go a long way towards building trust. Even if they don't like what they're hearing from him, they know he's being genuine. So,
and honestly, that's the type of stuff that stops kids from entering the portal to begin with. I mean, when these kids know that they've been fed lies by certain coaches or certain coaching staffs, and then the staffs don't follow through, kids can tell, when a coach is, giving you a load of what versus being sincere. And I think that's where Mario's honesty and sincerity really comes into play and helps the program.
Yep. So speaking of high profile recruits and commits, we did land another one in the last week. Joel Ervin out of Fort Myers, I believe, Blue. I'm sure you've seen quite a bit of Mr. Ervin. He's a big boy.
Yeah.
But what is your take on Joel Ervin?
Yeah, it's here's a kid that last year a lot of people really weren't looking at. Then all of a sudden started getting, more into the flow, more athletic, learning more about the game. Former University of Miami standout in Fort Myers graduate, Kelvin Harris, was the one that kind of tipped me off on him last year. And he says, you got to watch him. I mean, he's a big kid. He's still a work in progress. And then, you know how this goes, because now he'll go to an event and then somebody will see, Jesus, he's 6'6", 300-something pounds. And they'll start watching him. Louisville liked him enough, and they swayed him enough early on where he committed to him, and then kind of probably came to his senses and said, you know what? Look at Miami's starting to do and develop with the offensive linemen. They're going to start, I think, a pipeline now with, Mauanoa and Okunlolo and some of those other guys to the NFL again, like they did back in the days with Leon Cersei and, Eric Winston and players like that. I think Miami's back at that level where they're as good as any offensive line in the country. And I think they're going to start producing more high-profile players. And and then everyone will kind of point to the job that Mario has done, and obviously what Alex Mirabal has done, and and it brings you players like Joel Ervin, a guy who probably is 2 years away from really making an impact, but still. That's what the offensive line is. It's your Mauanoas are very, very far and few between, believe me. I mean, and that's a tough position to come into in college, because you're an 18, 17-year-old kid playing with 22, 23-year-old guys that are ready for the NFL, and especially on the defensive line. But the fact that Miami's upgraded on the defensive line and have gotten the type of players over the last couple of years, with the Stinsons and Barrows and obviously Reuben Bain and Messidors, where your offensive line is, it's not a skate situation anymore in practice. They're elevating their game just like, the defensive backs will have an opportunity to do once the offensive receivers, and we know they have their talent at receiver. I mean, I sat there and watched them. They got talent. It's just an experience factor. And all of a sudden you see, a great game that Nye Carr or somebody else like that has. He catches 9 balls for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, and all of a sudden he's a guy. He's on so it doesn't take very much to get yourself on the map to where everybody's watching. And the window is very short. And Miami has those type of players that are capable of jumping onto the radar. But, obviously it's going to take, there's a lot of, they play in a conference where there's a lot of talent. So it's not going to just come overnight. But you look at somebody like a Mark Fletcher, who had a really good freshman year. And then all of a sudden he's considered as one of the top freshmen in the ACC. And that's how it goes. That's why I say, and I kind of agree with Jazz when he, talks about Luke Nickel. Luke Nickel has that ability where all of a sudden he's going to come in there and throw, he's going to be 23 of 31 for 305 and 2 touchdowns. And everyone goes, okay, I see what they're talking about. So that's where Miami's program's at. There's a lot of programs because of the portal and a lot of the opportunities that are being there for the kids that have the same opportunity. But I think Miami's worked a little bit harder to consolidate more of that talent, I believe, anyway.
Yeah. DJ, do you have thoughts on Ervin?
He's a really big body, like you guys alluded to. I mean, 6'6", and again, it's about continuing to build stability and depth on the offensive line. And Ervin is one of those guys that may still be a little bit raw, but you have a lot to work with there. And I think, again, and we mentioned this earlier in the show, 2 of the best offensive line minded coaches in the country. I really see this as a solid commitment. And having a good offensive line also helps you draw in, good quarterbacks, good quarterback recruits, good wide receiver recruits, because they know the quarterbacks will be able to get them the football. So it's kind of, although it's just an offensive line commitment, it certainly can affect the whole team in a positive way when you bring in impact players like Ervin.
Yep, no, for sure. There is momentum to these things, and
Yep.
And it's hard to find a more offensive lineman friendly coaching staff than this one. Just in terms of how they'll develop you for the next level. Shout out to Pimp Down in the chat. Any other players or anything y'all want to talk about before we transition to everyone's favorite segment here?
Yeah, the like I said, I had a talk last week about the kicking game. Mm-hmm. And you said, Vish, I mean, yeah, but look who we've had the last, couple of kickers, but still in this league, how many times did our kicker bail us out the last 2 years with field goals that, that became game winners? So I just think that there's gonna There's no automatic, and that's why they're really, really. Yeah, we couldn't do touchbacks. I understand, but we certainly got enough field goals to put points on the board. There's a lot of programs. Yeah, it did. It did. I'm not going to deny that it cost us points kicking short and giving teams. But the kid has a strong leg. That's there. He just has to get a little bit more active.
So I know we do have several kickers on the roster. So what is you think they'll still go in and try and get someone else in the portal, or?
Well, there. You know what? There's a chance. Like you said, there's a lot of kickers that are on the roster now, but they thought that the kid from Texas would be the answer. But so far hasn't. I mean, in the 2 times that I've watched him, he's been kind of erratic, and certainly that that's the Abram Murray kid. But they also have Carter Davis, a kid who's from Western High School. I believe he was out at New Mexico. They have Will Roca also. Carter's got a really strong leg. So we'll see. But Carter's definitely going to win the I think to answer some of those questions, I think Carter's going to be the type of guy that's going to kind of remedy. He's got a stronger kickoff leg than Borregales did. So that'll help.
And I think people underestimate how hard it is to find a good college kicker, to be honest with you. I mean, I've seen several, not just Miami, but several teams who just couldn't find a solid kicker. And, it's going to be interesting to see the development of the position over the course of, this off season and even during the regular season. And, good kickers and good punters, too, are invaluable. And Miami has been, blessed with some really great talent at both positions over the last couple of years. And now we have to find that next guy.
There's old Bubba Baxa. That's
I mean, that is the risk you run when you start, scraping everything out. Like we had 3 kickers on that team, and he couldn't get it done. And went to a couple.
That was a hard time right there.
Yeah, no, that Georgia Tech game just kept missing 20-yard field goals and extra points, and then lost in overtime is one that's hard to swallow there. So
we'll have to be like Texas A&M and put a sign out in the hallway of the one of the dorms. Say, hey, if you get kicked, I'll see you at 3:00 on Monday.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a men's soccer team, so you can't even use one of those kids. So. So yeah, no, we have been, as CCH says, we've been spoiled the last 5 years with the Borregales. Just kind of, they're not perfect, but they're basically going to make almost every kick, and that's a security blanket that we've definitely lost now. So
yeah, for sure.
Well, Dave's and Matt Bosch are kicking off, and even if he would have relished to kick him short so he could beat your ass. He probably the best tackling kicker ever. McEnany was like that too. What's the guy? I can't even think of it. Is that his name? The guy that has a show on ESPN?
Yeah, McAfee. He was like that too. But Bosher I think will go down as the best tackle. He would purposely kick shorter ones so he could kick your ass. And I remember like before the 5 years, like he's alluding to, it was tough going when you get a good kick, when you get good kickers, I mean, it's they have been elite, but that's changing. You got a new long snapper this year. Punter comes back. He's pretty good. He still does a good job. He'll still, do his job. But you got a new long snapper coming in, and the kicking game, and especially games against like Notre Dame, Florida. That the kicking game is going to be essential. Well, all games, but in those games, especially for field position, and I think that Carter has a chance to remedy the kickoff, so that'll help a little bit. But I know people like pass that off a little bit, and
that part of the game. Oh, well, we'll get anybody. You're not going to. It's not that easy. Just look at some of the teams around the country last year missing easy chip shots. Yeah, and then them's like the Syracuse kicker. What was he? 1 of 11, and then all of a sudden he came alive.
Well, everyone makes everything against us, so that's always something that'll wake you up.
It does seem like that, doesn't it?
I mean, we did have one season where no one missed a kick against us, so yeah, that does happen.
True.
Yep. No, that is an underrated part of the game that, we'll see. That's a big question mark for the Canes this year. All right, Blue, you ready for
I got a little throwback from 1991. And when Marshall Faulk and San Diego came to town.
Oh, I remember that was hyped up. That was a big hype game. That
was the game that when we got our boys Charles Farms and what's his name on the front, who I just saw the other day. Let's think of his name. Where was it? I think they had didn't what's his name have a quarterback too? That wasn't McGuire. That was back. Mark McGuire. Who was the quarterback for San Diego State?
I think it was Dan McGuire, but I don't think.
No, it wasn't. That was much before.
It wasn't.
That David Lowry. Okay, yeah. Marshall Faulk was the dude on this team. But Miami's, this was a good Miami team. Let's see who had some good. Jesse Armstead, and that's when they had some great linebackers.
Yeah, I mean that was a national championship winning team, Blue. So yeah, they were pretty good.
That was a great team. The coaches, that was that group. Crazy Dave Arnold, and wow, I got a chance to see Dennis Erickson came down. I saw him. Dennis got look at that team. Holy Christmas. Man, everybody you look at here, everybody like in these different rows that you look at. Holy mackerel. Jesse Armstead and Donnell Bennett, and holy mackerel. That's just nuts. There's my boy, Jonathan Harris, and Miami was tough, guys.
When people think about national championship teams, that's what one looks like. So
that's it right here.
Just so you're aware that's it's guys.
And speaking about kickers,
25 years later,
And speaking about kickers, they have one of the best in the history of Miami, and Carlos Huerta. So. Mr. Ice.
These are guys who, when you say the name 25 years later, you still know who it is. 35 years. Wow, 35. Whew.
That's a long time. That's 35 years. DJ, you weren't even
4 years away from me.
4 years away.
So I was 95. So
okay,
well, but still 30 years is not that does not sound good. I'd rather be 20 again. And
yeah, those were great. Those are great times. I still remember those great teams like in the late 80s and into the 90s, where you would go to spring when they would have their spring games at the Orange Bowl. And you would walk behind the bench and look at the names and say, oh, my God, I forgot about him. That's when they used to recruit at such a high level that even if you were an elite player, you wouldn't see the field for a couple of years, and that's at a time when those players would definitely, people would say, no one even questioned it. Nowadays, they'll say, what are you there for? Go to so-and-so. And, so anyway, so that's it. And we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Got 2 more weeks of spring. Next week, we could break down the spring game a little bit and see what positions and, get Jazz back in his new car.
It's not a new car. He said he had to take his truck over to his mom's. I'm not sure exactly what's going on over there. It might be a combination of car and manual labor.
Okay.
but
think if you own a truck, If you own a truck and your family member needs something, that's why I probably never had a truck. Hey, by the way, we're moving a couch. Could you bring your truck?
Oh, yeah.
How much will that hold, actually? So, yeah, hopefully he'll join me on Canes on Deck in a couple of minutes here. Otherwise, it'll just be me live on the stream with CCH yelling in the comments, kind of like what happened here. So,
yeah. All right.
We'll see. But yeah, we'll be back next week. Like you said, Blue, we can preview the spring game, talk about things we want to see, because it'll only be a few days away at that point. Thanks, everyone, always for joining us on these Mondays. I know the off seasons can feel long.
Yeah,
we're getting close. It's April. Tomorrow's April, and then it'll be summer practice before you know it, and then Notre Dame will be at the Rock. Yeah, Notre Dame will be at the Rock before you know it.
Can't wait.
Thanks, Blue and DJ, for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll see you again next week.
The 6 Rig Kane Show. Yeah. The 6 Rig Kane Show. Yeah. The 6 Rings Kane Show. You know.